Hey everyone, it's Joanne Molinaro, the Korean Vegan, and today I thought I'd show you how I made this extra creamy, dreamy, fancy lamian noodles. You can find the full recipe in the description below, and as with all my other YouTube videos, this is going to be a story time video where we talk about something that's on my mind, and if you can't guess, it's about lamian. So basically, anytime I make myself a lamian, I think about my dad. My dad loves noodles, like of any kind. He loves jjajangmyeon, jampong, ramyeon, spaghetti. He loves a good pasta. I remember when I took him to Hawaii for the first time and he tried this fresh seafood linguine. He told the restaurant owner that it was literally the best dish he'd ever eaten in his life. So he's a noodle-phile. So every time I eat ramyeon, I think about how he used to come back from the night shift, and the first thing he'd do is he'd head over to the kitchen, he'd bust out a packet of shinramyeon, and he'd start cooking it. And of course, my brother and I, who were late sleepers, we'd rouse from our slumber just from the spicy smell of shinramyeon boiling in my father's pot. I do borrow Nongshim's Sun Tofu ramen noodles and ramen packet for this recipe. And I actually was inspired to come up with this recipe specifically because of the number of food bloggers I was seeing on my Instagram, particularly non-Asian food bloggers who were sort of making fun of, quote, instant ramen. I also received a number of comments, mostly on my Twitter, some on my Instagram, on recipes wherein I use the ramen packet or the ramen noodles from Nongshim, suggesting that, wow, you're going to take a cheap 99-cent instant ramen packet broth instead of coming up with your own. And again, indubitably, all of the people making such comments were not of Asian descent. And I get it, guys. I generally don't like to eat too much processed food in my diet. But at the same time, I recognize the importance of incorporating foods that feed your soul, even if they may not be good for you in the traditional sense of the word. And ramyeon, particularly this kind of semi-instant ramyeon, as I call it, is the kind of food that really feeds me in a way that maybe nothing else can, because it reminds me so much of my dad. It reminds me of the times we were little and my dad didn't know how to cook anything else, and so he would make us some ramyeon. It reminds me of the time I took him to that trip to Maui and how much he enjoyed the noodles that he ate there. It reminds me of the many trips we made to the small Chinese food eatery in K-Town where he would order us jjajangmyeon or jampong, and my brother and I would split a bowl. And even beyond my dad, it reminds me so much of college when I missed Korean food, perhaps more than I have ever missed Korean food in my life, and how a box of instant kimchi bowls, which if you're Korean, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that would be almost a life-saving box to arrive at the dorms. Why? Because ramyeon makes us feel safe. It reminds us of our parents. It reminds us of our 할머니s. My 할머니, when we were babies, she would take the shinramyeon and she would add a whole bunch of water to the broth, and then she would wash it underneath more cold water to make it less spicy so that us kids could eat it without having our tummies hurt. I'm an adult now, but just because I'm 42 years old doesn't mean I feel 42 years old. Probably like a lot of you, sometimes I feel like I'm just faking it, that I'm an imposter, that underneath my 42-year-old skin, I'm still this 9 or 10-year-old girl. And I miss my parents. I miss my grandparents. I miss being able to rely on them for all the big things like housing and food and water and driving me to school and making sure that nothing bad will happen to me. I live in a world where they don't speak Korean. I live in a world where they don't normally eat lamian and kimchi. Instead of kimchi and lamian, people are eating meatloaf and fried chicken and pizza. As a vegan, I'm surrounded by wilted salads, kale and quinoa, and all sorts of other foods that I never even heard of growing up. And none of those things remind me of home. So pardon me if I prefer the instant lamian over anything that I or someone else makes from scratch. Because nothing I make from scratch can ever even come close to providing the sense of safety I feel the minute I open up that small aluminum foil packet of spicy broth. Anyways, that's just how I feel about this very controversial topic of instant lamian. I think it's always really important, particularly if you're a food blogger, to maybe be a little bit careful, be a little bit cautious before you start implicitly criticizing or making fun of cultural cuisines like lamian. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to hit that like button and also be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on future Korean vegan videos. Have a lovely day.